Hey, how's it going? It's Sam Frost here. In today's video, what I want to do is actually give you some advice if you're a business owner looking to get a new website created or developed for your business. So this is something that I've worked on and encountered in many client projects I've worked on in the past, where a business wants to get a new website designed and developed, and the process can often blow out time-wise, it can blow out cost-wise. The end product is often not quite what the business owner thought they were going to be getting. So this video is not really aimed at someone who's looking to do a DIY website. If you're just a small business starting out, web developers, web designers are probably going to disagree with me here, but I think that for a lot of smaller businesses, you can make a really good start just by going out and creating a basic site using something like Weebly or Squarespace or Wix or WordPress. It's not going to be perfect from a design perspective, it's not going to be perfect from an SEO perspective, but it's better than nothing, and when you've got limited resources, you've got to start somewhere. But if your business is starting to grow a little bit, maybe you're sort of a more, medium-sized business or definitely going beyond just the startup phases, and you want to have something that better represents your brand, that better represents who you are as a business, your value, you're probably going to want to have someone develop a site for you. Now, to disclose, I'm not a developer, I'm really not very good at it, but I've worked on enough projects to know where the sort of snags tend to come from a client's perspective and what can tend to make the process blow out cost-wise and time-wise. So what I want to do in this video is just give you some really simple tips on how you can make sure you're doing the best job possible at actually putting your requirements forward to different vendors so that you get a good deal when it comes to getting a new website. So the first thing that you need to do is you absolutely need to think about what it is you want your website to achieve. In my experience, the biggest issues in the web development process tend to come from a misalignment between the client and then the vendor, so the developer. So you, as the client, might have this idea in your head of what you want, and then the developer has a slightly different idea, and the finished project doesn't quite sort of meet in the middle, if you get what I mean. So that's why, as a client, one of the best things you can do to actually help the developer out and help them deliver you a good service is to have a really defined list, a really defined idea or scope of what it is you want the website to achieve. So is it just a basic informational site? Does it need to have a shopping cart? Do you want a membership site? So someone can purchase a product and then access members only content. Do you want the ability to have the checkout process push emails across to a marketing automation platform like ActiveCampaign or HubSpot? All of these things need to be considered, but by far, in my opinion, where the biggest problems tend to come is that these aren't scoped out at the start. So what will happen is the client will say, I want a website. They'll go and get quotes from a few different developers. They'll have these ideas in the back of their mind, and then the developer starts off on their merry way designing and developing the site. You might get to a staging site or a demo or a trial or whatever, and then it's suddenly, hey, what about this feature that we wanted? Well, if you didn't have it down on the page first, if you didn't scope it out right from the get-go and make sure the developer was aware of it, basically you're out of luck, because you're going to have to probably pay more to get that feature done. It's going to delay the project, and it's possibly going to sour the relationship as well. And I've actually seen this happen a few times on a few different projects that I've been involved in different sort of contexts or different ways, where what's really happened is there hasn't been enough work done by both parties at the start to really outline the feature set. So my view, if you're a client looking to purchase or acquire a new website, it's not good enough to go to a developer and say, I want a website. You need to go to a developer with a very clearly defined list of what you like, what you need to have in that site. So you need to be able to say, these are the things that are an absolute requirement. These are the things that are a nice to have. Ideally, if we can't do them now, we'd be able to add them on later at a reasonable cost. And these are the things that we could live without if they're too hard to do. So sort of graded on those three levels. It needs to be written down on a page or email, PDF document, even something like an Excel sheet with each item as a little, row. What you can't do is just keep it all up here in your head, because you'll always start thinking of more things during the build process, and what's going to happen is if you start wanting to add more functionality once something started to be built, it ups the cost. It's a little bit like building a house, and you go to a builder and you say, right, I want you to build me a house. and the builder comes back and says, okay, well, how about something like this? And they've got a plan that they think might work for you. And so you, at the time you go with it, you say, yeah, that's cool, start building me that house. 6 months down the line, or however long it takes, you go and check out the progress on the site, and you think, oh, well, actually, I wanted a double garage, not a single garage. Well, if you hadn't specified that from the start, if you were sort of happy with what the developer or the builder put back to you, well, you're going to have to pay, and you're going to have to wear the time delays for them to potentially knock down a whole piece of the house and make a double garage. So make sure as a start that if you only do one thing, make sure that you have all the functionalities you require listed. Don't be too worried if you can't explain them in the correct technical way. A good developer is going to be able to understand what you're asking for and sort of, rephrase it back to you and then do the technical implementation therein. So you don't need to learn the jargon, but what you must do is have a very good grasp on those functionalities you want. I've seen a few projects go awry because, it starts with the client saying they want a simple site, an online brochure basically, and then all of a sudden you'll get something added on like, we want a product customization tool. And that only gets announced halfway down the line, and suddenly the cost spikes and the time blows out months and months and months, and the whole process becomes very frustrating for everyone. So make sure if you do one thing, you have everything listed in one place before you start, and really think down the line. Don't fall into the trap of saying, oh, it'll just be easy to add it on down the track. Actually think about it now. Leverage the developer's knowledge and the developer's expertise to be able to tell you what's achievable within your budget, but what you mustn't do is sort of refuse to scope everything out in full detail, because that's going to get you into a lot of trouble, in my opinion. The second step to successful website procurement, in my opinion, is to have a very good grasp on what your budget is. Now, like any kind of building project, really, websites do have a tendency to blow out cost-wise. I think that both developers and clients have got better at sort of understanding the importance of budget, but do not go into this project without having a solid budget in mind. And be realistic about your budget as well. There's always a big variance in pricing. I've seen projects where 4 or 5 different vendors will submit their proposals, and there could be pricing ranging from $5,000 to $50,000. So there is a big variance, but what you need to do is know what your upper limit is. So don't go into this process without having a solid budget set in stone. Try as much as possible to avoid being flexible with that budget once you've set it as well. Now, my reasoning for that is really quite simple. If you've done your homework and you've planned out all the features you need and you've given those to the developer, they should be able to give you a firm price, and then you shouldn't have to worry about actually having to hand over more money. There's nothing more irritating for a business than being nickel and dimed. So you thought you were getting X and actually you're only getting Y, and you need to pay for the difference. So having that firm budget, married with that firm scope of what you need, that's going to give you a lot more certainty about the process. It's going to really help you to rest easy, sort of sleep easy at night, knowing that you're being looked after and you're not going to get some massive bill. Now, as part of the budgeting process as well, make sure you understand how the agency or the developer charges. Is it 50% upfront, 50% on completion? Is it monthly milestones? Understand the billing and understand what your duties are to pay to get the project moving properly. Also, as part of the payment budgeting, make sure you understand what the ongoing costs are. So what's it going to cost per month in hosting? Is there a service level agreement, an SLA, that gives you certain amounts of support, that gives you certain amounts of updates? If something breaks on the site, how do I get this fixed? What's the cost going to be? You need to get an idea of what this thing's going to cost, not only up front to purchase but also to maintain. It's just like a car. There's no point buying a car for $5,000 if it costs you another $5,000 a month to run it and maintain it. My preference is always for some sort of fixed monthly retainer that the developer charges you for hosting, that the developer charges you for maintenance, that the developer gives you some time if you need to have some little changes made here and there, little layout tweak here or a little code modification there, so that you don't wind up with some massive invoice being submitted to you at the end of the month when you thought you were just getting a little bit of free help, and it actually winds up morphing to a massive bill. So set your budget and then be very clear, make it clear to the developer you need to understand what the ongoing costs are going to be and how everything is charged. Is it per hour, per project? what is their system for billing, because there can be enormous variance in this regard. The next question you need to ask, and the next piece you need to understand, is what is the time frame for delivery? So are you looking at a month, 3 months, 6 months? Who knows? It really can vary. And also, it can be a little bit cheeky to ask, but is there any kind of consideration if through no fault of your own the project blows out? Now, if you look at, say, the airline industry with aviation, with planes, my understanding is that if an airline orders a whole load of expensive planes and Boeing or Airbus don't deliver them on time, there can often be late delivery payments back to the airline. Is there anything like that with the developer? If they suddenly get swamped with work and this 3-month project turns into 6 months, are you going to get any kind of consideration back? Now, that may not be possible. You may not be able to get it. And it may be that you cause delays by not providing content or information or responses in time. But do clarify this, but most importantly, make sure that you get it down in writing when this project should be finished by, ideally with some milestones within. This is the date at which we'd have the design done, this is the date at which we're going to have a staging site, this is the date at which we're going to go live. All those things should be mapped out as well. That will make the process a lot easier to follow. Another tip is to make sure that you understand what you're going to get as far as deliverables go, and also how the site's being built. So is it being built on a content management system like WordPress, or is it being built on some kind of in-house or independently owned internal development platform that you're not going to be able to move away from if you run into a problem with that developer? I have seen some businesses get really stung by this, where they go with a cheap option and it actually turns out that it's some kind of proprietary CMS that the developer's building the site on. They're possibly using it to roll out many sites quickly, and you're locked into some kind of horrendous contract, or if the development company actually falls over, they go out of business, suddenly you're stuck with something that's completely unsupported and you've got to go pay another developer to build you a new site. So much better to stick to trusted platforms like WordPress. Something like WordPress is good. Even potentially developers who are working with some of these, simple CMSs like Squarespace, anything like that's proven and has been around for a while is much better than anything proprietary that's being developed in-house. Obviously there are lots of different ways to develop, and I'm not an expert on development, but where I have seen businesses really get stuck is by purchasing website packages that are built on some kind of platform that the development company has designed and created themselves, and there can be all sorts of terrible ramifications from that. So avoid that wherever possible. Stick with trusted platforms. WordPress is probably one of the best examples of this, but there are other examples too, like Craft. That's another great CMS that a lot of developers are working with these days as well. My final piece of advice is, if something seems too cheap to be true, too good of a deal to be true, it probably is. I've seen a lot of businesses in the past get stung by pursuing very cheap, aggressively priced deals that I think are actually loss leaders. And then in the contract and the terms of trade, it's all structured so that every minor variation, every update, every change, everything is all on your business to pay. And you'll wind up with a pretty crappy initial site that you're then basically forced to spend a whole load more money at a vastly inflated cost fixing. So do be careful of that as well. And make sure you actually check any independent reviews that you can find for the vendor. Ask for testimonials, call them, or email them, and make sure that you can actually get some verification from other people that they had a good process and a good experience working with that particular company. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you've got a comment, you can leave one below. Email me anytime on info@samfrost.co.nz. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.